the villain. Controversy, cheating, addiction, and depression.
And drinks a little, they can fall into a depressed state where they're not thinking clearly.
Just how close was Dick Van Dyke to taking his own life? Nope, this doesn't sound like the squeaky clean, bright Disney star we all knew and loved. Or, well, we thought we knew. So just how did one tragic interview expose Dick Van Dyke?
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
And, well, for Dick, it all came to a head in a single interview that changed it all.
That's the tough part, is to say I am an alcoholic, isn't it?
It really is. It's the hardest part of treatment.
And things got pretty dark.
It was real dark in there. Why, yeah, you couldn't see anything.
This is our most spinning video yet. Hey, I'm Nostalgic Nick with Do You Remember? We only cover the best of music, movies, and TV from our favorite decades, so thank you so much for tuning in. We spend well over 50 hours on research, editing, and voicing each and every video to make sure we get it right. Unlike all those others that rely on the fake program voices and the computer-generated information, repeating the same things over and over. So join our community. Hit that thumbs up icon. It helps the channel more than you might know, and the bigger the channel gets, the better we can keep the good stuff coming. Now, Dick Van Dyke, was it destiny? Could he have altered fate? Let's find out. My father's sins. Okay, before the interview, we have another interview with Angela Winnell Dick, where Dick said, in therapy, I realized I was repeating my father's mistakes. His father was Loren Cookie Van Dyke. In describing his father, Dick would say he was a fun-loving jazz musician, a Rolling Stone-free spirit, the life of the party, handsome and all. But when Dick was born, all that came to an end. Suddenly, the good life as he knew it vanished, and he got a job as a salesman. He hated the work. Dick would continue with, years later when I saw Death of a Salesman, I was depressed for a month. It was Dad's story. And that fact, that deep, deep wound, would haunt Dick into his career. Secret love child. Okay, so let's set the scene. Can you imagine the anxiety of a soon-to-be 18-year-old kid in February of 1943? You know, the war in Europe looming. Well, Dick felt that anxiety, and he was anticipating the draft. He said, quote, I'm going to be 18 in March. That means I'll be up for the draft. I really don't want to go, and I really don't want to be in the infantry. Dick speaking to his mom here, and he said, so I'm thinking I ought to join now and try to get in the Air Force. But then Dick's mom dropped the bomb, so to speak. She said, you're already 18. His jaw dropped. Dick was shocked. But how, he stammered. Okay, so why the mystery? Why did they hide Dick's real birth date from Dick? Why did his parents want to keep his birth a secret, to the point that they left town, laid low in Missouri, and went back to his hometown Danville only after he was born? Van Dyke didn't even know his real birthday. Well, at first, Dick's mom said it was because of complications. A premature birth, where the parents bumped up the birth date to the expected date. And if that doesn't make sense, well, yeah, the more honest grandmother Van Dyke also called bullcrap. She told him the truth. It was because the age-old issue of being too risque. Dick was conceived out of wedlock, and point blank, he was a love child. High school dropout. So that subsequent lie his mother told forced Dick to drop out of school because of the draft. His high school diploma would be a topic of mystery that waited years to be solved. It wasn't until Dick was 90 years old that he returned to Danville High to watch their production of Bye Bye Birdie, and then he finally got his diploma. No stranger to controversy. Before we get to the incredibly revealing interview, let's set the tone for what industry Dick came up in. He laughably said, quote, I wanted to just lift my leg and break wind, but the studio nixed the idea. Back in those days, you couldn't break wind on camera. But hey, let's face it, you sure can do that today, and much more.
Who there called my name?
Yeah, I called you if your name is.
So what I'm getting at is he couldn't 100% be himself. I mean, nowadays, Dick Van Dyke's name doesn't fly.
It's the Van Show, starring Van.
They're messing with my shows!
If someone asks their remote for the Dick Van Dyke Show, they get told, quote, "Sorry, I cannot handle commands with that type of language." Also, if you type his name into Google, you don't get those usual most searched questions halfway down the page as you do for anyone else. It's like he was censored back then by prudes and today by computers. Even with the 2018 Mary Poppins remake, some classic seemingly innocent scenes were called into question. For many people today, the fun wasn't totally squeaky clean. People didn't think the chimney sweep scene was acceptable for modern audiences, believing it was a nod to rude caricatures back from the days of minstrel shows.
Oh, Bert, don't worry. You look healthy to me.
Healthy? I've got black lung from sweeping the chimneys.
Hell, it seemed as far back as the Dick Van Dyke Show, he would frequent the hot water. So, do you remember this? The whole episode, Rob is delusional about a mix-up of the new baby.
The longer we let the thing drag on, the tougher it's going to be. Now, there must be some way to make sure of this.
Not without upsetting a lot of people.
And only after meeting the Peters does Rob become certain whether the baby they have in their possession belongs to them or the Peters.
Come in.
Perhaps put best, I suppose the resolution doesn't seem as funny today as it did in 1963. As an old Greek philosopher once said, you can never step into the same river twice. Time goes by, and society like that river changes, and things that were hilarious to Grandpa merely puzzles the new gens. There was also a forbidden episode of this show. Van Dyke talked about the premise of this forbidden episode in a 1988 interview with the Sacramento Bee, saying, quote, "We ran into a problem once on the old show with a story about our child having walked in and seeing us make love in the morning. We didn't show it or anything, it was a story about behavior. The kid is acting very strange, and we finally figured out that's what must have happened. So no matter the time period, it seemed Dick Van Dyke pushed all the buttons. And not always on purpose, but by just being a little more open than society wanted their leading man to be. Trouble in paradise. Too broke to get married, Dick said himself. And so, Dick Van Dyke got married, all expenses paid, on the radio show Bride and Groom, while 15 million people listened. Wow, that's a lot of pressure on the marriage. Echoing his dad, Dick nearly left his acting passions behind to start an advertising business, but it fell apart before his eyes. From tragedy to devastation, his wife Margie miscarried their twins. They were still at the hospital grieving when they learned that their landlord was evicting them. Margie, earthly and artistic, was not cut out for Hollywood. Dick said, quote, "You can see she wore her hair short and eschewed makeup, and we were often mistaken for brother and sister." So after hitting some devastating walls, both Dick and Margie turned to substances to cope. Dick described the destructive feedback loop as, quote, "Our addictions were symptomatic of deeper problems in our relationship, and we were drifting apart." Cheater. It couldn't be, right? The squeaky clean, oh boy, Dick, say it ain't so. Well, our favorite leading man sealed their fate when his eyes began to stray too far from the marriage. Dick Van Dyke began an affair with Michelle Triola. And I'm talking a long affair. It spanned past his divorce from Margie, and in full, it lasted on and off for over 3 decades. So that kind of explains this next bit. The darkest days, Dick began to medicate his personal struggles. You know, the family secrets, the personal tragedies, and one career setback after another. He needed an escape. And unfortunately for Dick, he found what he thought was salvation. He shared, quote, "I found if I had a drink it would loosen me up. The barriers went down and I became very social." And yeah, I can sympathize here. It is often a quick fix, but it can also be a crutch, and it can immediately replace his old problem with a new one. And that's exactly what happened to Dick. He said, quote, "I drank at home, but instead of having a martini, I would have 3 or 4 martinis. I had no idea that I had addiction in my personality." And this was compounded by, again, his first wife's own drug and alcohol addiction, and it left Dick in no state to give her the help she needed too. They moved houses to hope for a brighter future, but instead they entered a strong celebrity culture of self-destruction. As Dick puts it, quote, "We moved to a neighborhood full of young families with the same age kids, and everyone drank heavily. There were big parties every night. I would go to work with terrible hangovers, which if you're dancing is really hard." And boy did Dick dance a lot, and very hard. He was always sweating bullets, and now, well, we know why. He pursued rehab not just once but twice, and eventually he and Margie crossed paths there. He shared, quote, "On my last day, Margie came to pick me up. However, after a few minutes, the counselor came in and said that Margie was taking over my room. It turned out Margie had a bigger problem with Librium than alcohol. She'd been taking the drug for anxiety and depression and was hooked." Dick was clueless to this fact. Maybe it was because he was consumed with personal doubt and an intense alcohol dependency. But Dick would say, quote, "We were quite a pair, a drunk and an addict." Therapy at least was eye-opening, and Dick realized he had become a carbon copy of his old man. You know, the jazz-playing happy guy. But his dad's life got derailed when Dick was born. You know, the whole love child thing. Once again, it's rearing its baby head. Dick's dad was forced to grow up and get a job that he hated as a salesman. He lost his inner fire. You'd think that recognizing that he had become his father would help Dick, but that second rehab drove Dick to really spiral. Van Dyke reveals, saying, quote, "You get suicidal and think you just can't go on." And this struggle with alcohol and depression near suicidal also saw Dick confide in his agent's secretary, a woman by the name of, yes, Michelle Triola. He betrayed Margie's trust, and their marriage would never recover. Dick Van Dyke would fight his addiction for 25 years, nearly taking him to death's doorstep. But then, thankfully, something changed. The interview.
You had been alcoholic. Actually, that isn't correct to say, is it?
The Dick Cavett interview was revolutionary. It changed how we thought about Van Dyke and how we thought about alcoholics in general. Addiction, cancer, depression, these were private battles for behind closed doors. But now, one of America's shiniest actors was bringing it into the light. November 14th, 1974, Dick Van Dyke said it all. Everything we wanted to hear, but more importantly, everything so many people desperately needed to hear. Their very lives depended on it. So just take this little dose of wisdom.
There are a lot of people dying from alcoholism because the rest of us are enabling them to, because there's a stigma about that disease. And for centuries, they've been putting the blame on the character of the addict, and it's not so.
Dick also had some helpful and kinda scary statistics for everyone to keep in mind, especially if you're a big drinker.
You lose about 10,000 brain cells. Gone, dead, died, forever.
Van Dyke also wasn't afraid to call out the culture that encourages performers to make bad choices.
A lot of performers claim that they do get better in performance if they have a drink.
People who will adapt chemically to alcohol, it very likely is true.
It's a cycle, you have to break it. Although Dick himself did not fall into that vicious cycle of performing and drinking, he thought alcohol was more of a dulling thing, the after-work drink or 5. This interview was eye-opening. He aired all of his dirty laundry because viewers deserved a full picture. Let's face it, this was and still is a deep-rooted problem that Dick Van Dyke covered when most media didn't say a peep. I mean, just recently, Justin Timberlake was pulled over in the Hamptons for driving while intoxicated. Nothing has changed. It hasn't gone away. And that's why I think this interview is as relevant now as back in 1974. Yes, it was a long, rough road full of mistakes and pain, But there's something to be said about turning something so personal and vulnerable into a learning opportunity for thousands more.
Yeah, that's the tough part, is to say I am an alcoholic, isn't it?
It really is. It's the hardest part of treatment.
Let's take a look at some real comments of this groundbreaking and bravely honest interview. I love how ahead of the time Dick Van Dyke was. Him making the difference of the many ways of being an alcoholic instead of the old, stumbling, drunk cliches. This was in the 70s that he is talking about alcoholism and drugs as a health issue. Great interview. This could be used as an educational tool, and yeah, we agree. That's why we dusted off this old interview. It's incredible. Finally, we have to give huge props to Dick Cavett. One of the best interviewers of all time, but this interview was poignant and the questions so tasteful.
You were destroying it. Therefore, you must hate yourself. Therefore, you must go to a psychiatrist, would, I suppose, be the line of reasoning.
That's true.
It's mandatory watching if I had my way. They say never meet your heroes. It's the fastest way to destroy dreams and pop bubbles. And Dick Van Dyke certainly has a cloudy past for someone the Magic Kingdom deemed a Disney legend. But that makes learning his story all the more invaluable, and it makes it all the more admirable how he threw the doors wide open to his troubled past so that so many others could learn and find solidarity. And hell, that can make a world of difference and maybe save a life. So, what surprised you the most about the life of Dick Van Dyke? Do you remember this incredible interview from 1974? What's the best thing Dick said? And okay, what's your favorite performance of Dick Van Dyke? Was it his sitcom, his role in Mary Poppins, or Chitty Chitty Bang Bang perhaps? Get down below and tell us anything and everything about Dick Van Dyke. We love to read your points, and honestly, we're nothing without you. Again, unlike the robot overlords, a lot of human love and care went into this trip down memory lane. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit that thumbs up icon. It really helps our channel more than you might know. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next discovery. But most importantly, from all of us here at Do You Remember, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next supercalifragilisticexpialidocious video.